the things that's nice about Unity Fellowship is the fact that no matter whether you're white, black, brown, purple, green, gay, straight, bi, trans, you're welcome here. It's just the mindset of everybody here, and Pastor Bob all the way down. Everybody here. It's it's home, and you feel like you're going home. You feel like you're in a big accepting family when you're here.
So what makes Unity Fellowship different from other churches in Owensboro is their focus on making sure that everyone feels welcomed and accepted with no conditions. They're accepting of the LGBTQ plus community, of different people from different backgrounds and cultures, and this is what really led me to joining Unity Fellowship. And I also feel like many churches focus on the individual, but we are actually meant to be in relationship with others. The concept of Ubuntu, that if one person is oppressed, that all people are oppressed. And I feel like Pastor Bob, in his sermons, he really focuses on systemic injustices and oppression, and that God is on the side of the oppressed.
Well, after many years of being out of the church, we came to a point where we were ready to find a church, but I in particular knew that I no longer wanted a part of what I had experienced as a younger person. My soul and spirit had just no longer aligned with what I was being taught about myself. So I left the church for many years, and then as a couple years later, we decided we wanted to return to a church. So a new part of that had to be a church that was totally accepting and that not just welcome to come to the door, but could fully participate in all regard should we desire. And so we began to visit churches, and we visited Unity Fellowship a while back, and felt like we had made a discovery in a church home.
And we also like this church because it's a teaching church. Brother Bob, every Sunday we have the opportunity after the service, or even sometimes during it, if we have questions and we're not sure of what he's talking about, or if we have questions as to the sermon that he's preaching, that we're allowed to do that. And it's something that I've never had in a church. And it's been very enlightening, and I've learned a lot about myself, and I've learned about a lot of things, actually. And above and beyond anything else, I know that I'm loved. I know that Scott's loved, and I know that we're loved together.
And so it's not just like going to mass at a big church and you just go in, hear the thing, get up and leave. Here you actually are charged with asking yourself, what does it mean? And the membership is small enough we can all interact during the sermon as well as after the sermon. So we can ask each other questions. You learn from other people with their comments or their questions about whatever we're discussing that week or what was discussed the week before or whatever. And unlike a large church where you just know the people from sight, you actually know the people here. Whether they are active in doing something or they're just here every week and they participate in how are you doing and stuff like that. Or they tell you how somebody else that they've talked to that you haven't seen is doing. So it's like a very large, it's not just a church family, it's a large family.
Just because you came from a Baptist background or a Pentecostal background or a Catholic background doesn't mean you're not welcome. Unity will surprises a lot of people because everyone is accepted. You will feel comfortable. You won't feel out of place. You won't feel judged. You'll feel like you belong.
folks. This is Pastor Bob coming to you from Unity Fellowship. You may be really sick of church. You may have given up on church a long time ago, and maybe you're not even looking for a place. But I want to invite you to a faith community where you'll be safe, where you can be accepted for who you are, always, for whoever you are right now on your faith journey. Check us out on Facebook Live. Check us out on Zoom. I think you'll find a place that you're safe, a place that you'll be accepted, a place that you'll feel comfortable.
What makes Unity Fellowship different from other churches in Owensboro is their focus on making sure that everyone feels welcomed and accepted with no conditions. They're accepting of the LGBTQ plus community, of different people from different backgrounds and cultures, and this is what really led me to joining Unity Fellowship. This community, at its heart, is open to everyone, and even if you are on the fence and you might disagree, we are still open to having that dialogue and that discussion that fosters growth and understanding. So I feel like the people who come to Unity Fellowship are so open and loving that even if you didn't agree with something that the church promotes, that you're still able to express that and not be judged.
Good morning. Today is the third Sunday of Lent. I wanted to say hello and welcome. We're glad that you are joining us today from wherever in the world you may be. We're glad that you found us and hope that you feel the welcome that we extend. We extend a welcome to absolutely everyone. No exceptions. We accept you and affirm you for your whole person. So welcome. Those of you who are joining us on Zoom or on Facebook or on our webpage, as well as those who are gathered there in person. Good morning and welcome. Let me introduce our associate pastor, Pastor Gator Lone Wolf. Say a word to us.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to the beautiful sentiment that Bob shared, other than the fact that you've entered a safe space, and we know that the storms of life can be unrelenting, and know that you are safe here. Again, you're welcome, and we invite you to engage in dialogue with us during this service, and that's the way we create the fellowship. So very excited you're with us.
And we have a video to begin. Today is the letter I. I cannot see which video I put up there for first.
I know who I am.
Yeah, I see it now. Thank you. Okay, it's time to share our news, joys, and concerns. If you've got a prayer concern or a joy, or just some news, what's going on in your life or around you, you'd like to share that with you. If you're on Facebook or on our webpage, you'll have to put it in the chat section, and we'll read it to those who are watching. And if you're on Zoom, you can unmute yourself and speak. If you're there in person, wave a hand, somebody will get a microphone to you, and you can speak so that everyone can hear you. News, joys, and concerns, anyone?
Bob, I'm asking for prayers for my friend Andy, who's having surgery on Thursday.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah Jane. Praying for Andy. He's having surgery. Anyone else this morning?
Joy's, Alan had a heart cath Monday. They had to put 2 stents, but everything went good.
Okay. Rejoicing that he's okay after that. Good. I'd like to ask you to be praying for my niece, Wendy. Wendy's going through some real rough times right now. I won't go into detail on that, but be praying for Wendy, if you would, please. And while I'm speaking, I'll go ahead and give a quick report on Debbie. We had a really big week this week. This week, we went to Vanderbilt for the evaluation process for the stem cell transplant. It looks like everything is a go. She passed all of her tests, indicating that she's got the physical ability to endure what they're going to try to do to her. One of the doctors said that the toxicity of the chemo that she's going to get is really intense. It's going to be a long process of recovery once she gets that. That's why they harvest the stem cells and put them back in you after the treatment to help you recover. Anyway, we've got that ahead of us. The good news is that she's on track to get it, and she really needs that in order to get to remission with the myeloma.
Y'all have a date yet, Bob?
No, we don't. We're probably looking at a month to 6 weeks out at this point. But they'll probably call and say, okay, we're ready. And we drop everything and go. Anyone else? Any news? Any joys? Any concerns?
Bob, my concern is for our state and the senators and everything in the state progressing hatred and bigotry and not really understanding what they're saying or doing, because in my opinion,
Exactly.
probably none of them have ever seen a drag queen in performance.
Right. Probably not. Yeah, and it's not just our state. Our state is one of many.
Bob, I just want to remember all the folks struggling with addiction and whatever that means in their lives this morning.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's pray together. Pastor G, would you lead our prayer, please?
Sure. You pray with me. Creator, we first of all come to you grateful for another Sunday of fellowship with each other. We are grateful for our lives, for the time we have with each other. We raise different prayer concerns this morning. Many of us are going through valleys. Communities are going through valleys and are facing overwhelming odds. We also ask that you be with those mentioned this morning who are struggling with illness and disease, and give them the strength and courage to endure. Be with those unspoken prayers this morning as well, and comfort and guide those individuals in only the way you can. Lastly, open our hearts and minds to the discussion this morning, planting us new seeds of hope that, like the daylilies, are beginning to come out of the ground, even though the cold wind still blows. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for that. Need the screen. What's next? Oh, our affirmation. Affirmation of oneness. Every week we repeat these words together as a reminder of who we are and what we're about. Would you say them with me, please? We gather in oneness together. We praise and worship God together. We proclaim God together. We welcome and affirm all persons in God's love together. We seek to live for God with every breath and heartbeat together. If you have not done so, I would encourage you to join our contact list by texting the word ADD, A-D-D, to 270-201-5022 every Sunday morning about 8:40, not 5:40, about 8:40. You'll receive a text with the topic for the day, as well as links how you can join the conversation. Occasionally we'll send out a reminder like we did Saturday that it's time to spring forward. But other than that, it's mostly just the Sunday morning 8:40 text about the topics. What's next? Oh, tithes and offerings. Numerous ways that you can give. Let me say just a word. If you are, whether you're a regular attender or you just pop in now and then, or even if it's your first time, this is a church that never pressures anyone about giving, but we are in desperate need. We are finding it very difficult to maintain where we are, and I just want you to know the need is there. We do a lot of ministry in our building and in our community. If you value that, if you value what we do on Sunday mornings, I would encourage you to be a giver. Make it a regular, ongoing gift if you could, but we need the help. Having said that, never would we want you to take your own resources that you need, so there's no pressure whatsoever. We're glad that you've joined us and can be a part of this community. But there's several ways to give. You can text the word give to 270-449-1664. You can click on the Donate Now button that you find on our Facebook page or on our website. Or you can go old school, mail it P.O. Box 1401 in Owensboro, 42302. Or last of all, if you're there in person, you can drop it in an offering plate as you leave. All gifts are greatly appreciated. So thank you for any gift that you're able to give. Our last video for the day just disappeared on me. Winton Phillips, Wintley Phipps. I can't read, but a song that we all know and love, or most of us know and love anyway. It is well with my soul. This is an incredible voice. This one from Whitley. We have been studying through the scriptures on an alphabetical journey. Began with the letter A, and we've made it all the way up to the letter I this week. Today's topic is I is for idolatry. Begin with some scripture reading. If you would just join me. First from Exodus, from the Ten Commandments that we know. Then God spoke these words, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You must have no other gods before me. Do not make an idol for yourself, no form whatsoever of anything in the sky above or the earth below or in the waters under the earth. Do not bow down to them. Do not serve them. And then skipping to the New Testament, where Paul in 1 Corinthians says, therefore, my beloved, shun the worship of idols. And then backing up to the Gospels, Jesus expands our thoughts about idolatry just a bit by saying this in his Sermon on the Mount. No one can serve two masters, for you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. So I want to begin this morning before our teaching about that. I do want to do a little teaching on the topic. But let's begin by just asking the question, what is idolatry and how relevant is this command to shun idolatry in our day and age? How is this relevant today? We know that when the Ten Commandments were given, idolatry was a real thing, that there were lots and lots and lots of graven images, most notably golden calves, but there were many others as well that you could see everywhere, especially in the pagan lands around Israel. But that's not really what we see today, at least not the same way that it was in ancient days. What do you think? What is idolatry, and how relevant is this topic?
Well, Bob, I think for some people it's money and how big of a house they can have, or how big of a car, how fancy a car, how nice of brand name clothes you have.
Okay.
I've always been taught that anything, no matter what, you put before God is idolatry.
Okay, anything you put before God. All right, good. Thank you. Anyone else? Your thoughts?
I think some Christians have placed the Bible above God and have created an idol out of religion.
Yes. Is that possible? Can we actually substitute our religion for God? If we don't see a bunch of idols sitting around in our world today, how is this relevant to us? Well, you mentioned money and prestige a moment ago. That's one way. But is this really relevant?
I think it absolutely is, Bob. if you say run your business in a way that you are more worried about how much money you're going to make than how you treat your employees or maybe the people that your business serves, I think that's putting your business before God, because that's not the way God expects people to behave.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Your business can be a substitute.
Yeah, and that's going along with what Sarah Jane's saying. I know in the past, I come out of grocery stores too. We run them, and you try to sell things at a reasonable price, as cheap as you can. And today it seems like they sell things as high as they can, irregardless of what it is. You go to the grocery store and it's up 100% what it was last week. So it's just companies trying to take advantage of the situation where they think they can.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts this morning? The question is, what is idolatry and how is it relevant to us today?
I think some people put politicians up before God.
Yes. Thank you. Politicians.
I think sometimes we put our spouse or our partner or family, right, friends. We don't really know it, but we're beginning to orbit around them and depending on them for our happiness and our security and our self-worth. And it just doesn't work that way.
Right, right. I'm not real sure if I missed the context of the comment, but Dia on Facebook says that has nothing to do with Christianity. Dia, if you would maybe expand on that just a little bit, and I'll try to share that in a moment as soon as you do. Anyone else? Your thoughts? Okay, so let me do a little teaching from the Ten Commandments and where it starts. The first two commandments are given. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of slavery. Do not put any other gods before me. Do not make idols for yourself in any form whatsoever, and don't bow down to them. The laws that God was handing down were intended to help them shake off the shackles of bondage to the empire in Egypt. God was creating in them a freer society. I brought you out of slavery. Do not return to it. Stay free, in other words. Even as you read through the rest of the Ten Commandments, even the Sabbath law was meant to be a freeing thing. Don't be a slave to yourself. Don't be a slave to ambition. Don't be a slave to the empire. Don't be a slave to idolatry in any form, whatever that form might be. You see, slaves in Egypt were nothing more than a commodity. And God is saying, that's over. We're done with that. I'm restoring the covenant that I made with Abraham. I will be your God, and you will be my people. No other God but me. That's the first commandment. The second is no idols, no images of any kind. In Egypt, idols were everywhere. Images were everywhere because they considered that Pharaoh was God, and Pharaoh understood the power of imagery. So there were images of Pharaoh around every corner, in the most prominent places. They were images that were meant to have power over the people. They were meant to remind these slave people that they were slaves, to intimidate them, to remind them of who's in charge, to demand their loyalty. And for those who were not enslaved, it was meant to consolidate and unite them around the power of the Pharaoh. Someone mentioned politicians a few moments ago. Yes, absolutely. Politicians understand the power of imagery as well. It's why they take photos in particular places, doing particular things. It's why former President Trump hugged an American flag and stood in front of a church with a Bible in his hand. That's why they hold rallies with fireworks displays. Those are all the kinds of images that are meant to consolidate and unite us around a certain political ideology. And it's also why some symbolic actions are criticized, such as the criticism of the kneeling during the playing of the national anthem. They understand the power of imagery, whether it's their imagery or someone else's imagery that's meant to speak about a certain thing. There is a certain kind of attraction that we all have to imagery and symbols. We have an emotional response and an emotional attachment to these things. And that is where their power lies. It's where the danger lies as well. There is great potential for abuse with the imagery that calls for our attention. And Roy said a little while ago that anything can become an idol. Anything can become a substitute for God. So let's riff on that just a little bit. What are name some things? We've named a few already, but let's keep that list going. What are some things that you can think of besides money, family, etc.? What are some other things that either are symbols that call for our devotion, or other items that become substitutes for God?
Bob, I'm not talking about you, but there are some pastors who hold themselves up that their congregations worship, sometimes in place of God.
Right. Yeah, personality cults. Very often they're subtle. Than the God that they're supposed to be pointing to.
Yes, like cult leaders or even some that aren't quite that far.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a cult, actually. You're right. It can be a mainline religious organization, and still the personality of the leader kind of supersedes the God that they're supposed to be pointing to. Yeah, absolutely.
Just some things that people idolize. A lot of people idolize singers, movie stars, and
Celebrity.
And a lot of the real rich people idolize cars. They get all the fancy cars they can get and have buildings full of them, So they can idolize a lot of things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's keep it going. What else? Well, here's some that we've already mentioned. We've mentioned politicians and ideology, political ideology. We've mentioned the Bible. The church can be that. Personality of leaders, family. Here's some others, and I've had time to think about it. You all are just coming at it today. But career and status. Some people worship the earth or creation, and that becomes for them their God. Not a manifestation of God, not an indicator of God on earth, but becomes their God. Violence. I was reading an article just the other day that likened our take on violence in the world as being an idolatrous action. Racism, materialism, some pursuit of joy and happiness can supersede our devotion to God. Expanding our mind and knowledge can become a substitute for God. Our own identity and our own self. If we begin to think of ourselves as all that, that can be idolatrous. Our appearance can become an idol. Our influence and fame, especially in the world of social media now, that can become such an all-consuming thing that it replaces God in our life. Not all those things are bad things, are they? So here's my question. Where is the line? How do we know when we've crossed the line and that has become a substitute for God? By the way, backing back up to the teaching from earlier, when God gave the commandment not to make graven images, there was nothing wrong with creating an image in and of itself. It's when the image is less than the real thing. Even when we're trying to create an image that represents God, like a cross, it can be one of those images that represents God to us, but it's a substitute for the real thing. The created becomes greater than the creator. Does that make sense? Where's that line? How do we know when we've crossed the line from it's something that's normally a good thing, but it has become consuming in our lives? Where is that line?
Bob, I can only speak for myself. That line I've noticed, particularly when I realize my self-worth is tied up in something other than the Creator's love. And my happiness is tied up in something other than the Creator's love. So it's these life-giving things that are healthy, right? Your security, your happiness, your self-worth, you need those. But when all of a sudden something other than the Creator you're leaning on to provide those, that's where the line appears for me. And you will always be disappointed. You will always be hurt. That's not being pessimistic. That's just stating you cannot place the weight of your happiness and your self-worth on another person. That's unfair to them. It's unrealistic to do that with a career. You're not your career. So again, that's where I see the line for my own self.
Those lines can be real blurry sometimes, can't they?
Bob,
Yes,
Bob,
ma'am.
can you hear me?
Hey,
This
Carol.
is Carol.
Yes, we
I
can
think
hear you.
sometimes
Hey, Carol.
our church buildings become idols. They are very sustaining for us. They nourish us, but I see, especially in our building now, some of us have tried to hold on to what it was instead of letting it become what it can be in ways that God can serve us better than before.
Yes, yes. Talk about imagery. It's the imagery of that building that has an emotional attachment for us, isn't it?
Very much
remember, yeah, we remember things that happened there. We remember particular places in the building, or the stained glass windows, or the cross that hangs in a certain place, or an organ. And those things can be very emotionally attaching. By the way, getting back to earlier, I asked Dia for a little bit of explanation of what she was talking about. She was saying worshiping an idol is there. Christianity has nothing to do with that. So thank you for that clarification. Other thoughts right now about where that line is, or perhaps someone's got a question. We invite your questions as well. One commentator I was reading puts it this way: idolatry is spiritually dangerous because it distorts the relationship between God and creation. It often takes something that is good and true, which we talked about just a minute ago, and encourages us to focus our spiritual attention on it instead of God, putting it in the place of God instead of honoring and respecting it in its relative value. And that's where the line is. It gets out of balance, and it starts to take precedence. As we were beginning to think about this and prepare for today, Pastor G and I often discuss it beforehand, and so I asked him, and I don't know if you remember what you said, but I'm going to put you on the spot here in just a moment. I asked Pastor G the other day, I said, why is idolatry forbidden by God? What's the big deal? Is it just that God wanted to give us another rule to follow? What's the big deal? Why is it so important to God?
All right. Let's see if I remember. I think I said that the reason that God set forth that rule, if you will, is to protect us from becoming hurt and wounded, seeking love, affirmation, and inclusion from the wrong sources, building our foundations on sand, in other words. God doesn't want us to fail. God doesn't want us to be hurt. And so I think that leading toward keeping God in the center, not to stroke God's ego, but to stay centered, to build your foundation on rock, so that when life storms come, your house isn't completely blown over. Your self-worth isn't gone with a relationship that breaks up. I think that's what I was saying. So it was out of love and concern for us that idolatry is spoken against.
Right.
Did I get it right, Bob?
You got it right last time, and you got it right again today.
Okay.
You nailed it.
All right. Thank you.
Reaction to that? Anyone?
I think that is very true, and you know, we all know someone who has either lost a relationship or a job, or and they feel like that they can't go on because they've lost everything, and it's because they had too much of themselves in that thing, and had lost touch with who they are.
Yeah. Our idols.
To
those
me, it
things
all
that-
circles back to this fact that you can't serve two masters. You'll
Yes,
overdo one
absolutely.
over the other, and therefore you've got a conflict.
You cannot have two ultimate things that call for your attention. You can only have one. God says, "I'm the one. In me, you find freedom. In me, you are released. In me, you are all that you need to be." Idols are imitations of the real thing. They misdirect us from the image of God that God has already placed on earth. By the way, let me add one more teaching real quickly. I'm going to go all the way back to the book of Genesis now. When God created humans, humankind, breathed into human the breath of life, and scriptures say that we were embedded with the image of God, God's very image in us. Every single one of us bear the image of God. One of the reasons God doesn't need any more imagery is because God's already placed that imagery on earth in humankind, in us. We are bearers of God's image. If you really ponder that, really take that into consideration, that's a pretty powerful thought, that we are God's image on earth. It's the reason that God says to care for each other. It's the reason that Jesus said the two great commandments are love God and love the thing that God placed God's image in, others, the people around us. That's the reason that it doesn't matter what color you are. That's the reason it doesn't matter who your parents are. It's the reason it doesn't matter whether you have any kind of disabilities. It's the reason that there's absolutely nothing that can remove God's image in you. You bear God's image on earth. That's a pretty powerful thought. Comment or question on that? Anyone?
Hey, Bob,
Yes, ma'am.
it's almost a thought that's more than I can handle.
It's pretty huge.
And the
It's
and the
pretty
meaning
huge.
of it and the responsibility of it is pretty good, pretty deep.
Yeah, yeah.
Bob, if I could add, and I know we're almost at time, I just want to make sure that folks don't approach idolatry in the sense of understanding God as jealous or a fragile ego
Yes. Thank you.
or
Yeah.
God needing you to worship God to feel fulfilled or and angry. That's missing the mark on what God is talking about when it comes to idolatry. It is completely out of the love God has for you and your well-being. God doesn't need any of us to worship God to be God. And I would venture to say, God's not angry if you lose track and you find something else and you begin to orbit that and worship that. God's not angry. God's concerned for you.
Yeah.
So try not to get in the sense of God's an angry monster, and if I don't worship God, he's going to rain down hell on me. That's not idolatry.
Right.
Thanks, Bob, for giving me that
Yes,
moment.
thank you for that clarification. I was thinking along a similar strain myself, in order to try to give some kind of imagery for it. All of us know people who have been consumed by drugs or alcohol. Every one of us know people who have found themselves addicted, who found themselves so consumed with that it destroys their lives. And for us to say, don't do drugs, for instance, we don't say that because we're jealous of them. We don't say that because of anything other than our love and concern for what that does to them, how it destroys them. That's exactly where God is coming from when God says, don't make idols. You carry my image in you. There is nothing else that is needed. If you want to be free, if you want to be truly free, if you want to be all that I've created you to be, don't go down the path of letting anything else steal that away from you. You find your freedom, your joy, your happiness in me because you bear my image in the world. Final comments, anyone? We're about to close this down. So we come to that question that we ponder for the week. In whom or in what do we put our ultimate trust? Let that be our pondering question for the week. Thank you for joining us. So glad that you have. Hope that you'll come back next week. We might have a surprise topic next week. So hang on and find out next week what we're talking about. J is for, I'll leave it as a question mark for now. God bless you. Everyone take care. Be free.